Welcome to the Grazing Grass Podcast, episode 133.
Don't be afraid to make mistakes, and you're not going to ask a stupid question.
You're listening to the Grazing Grass Podcast, sharing information and stories of grass-based livestock production utilizing regenerative practices. I'm your host, Cal Hardage. You're growing more than grass. You're growing a healthier ecosystem to help your cattle thrive in their environment. You're growing your livelihood by increasing your carrying capacity and reducing your operating costs. You're growing stronger communities and a legacy to last generations. The grazing management decisions you make today impact everything from the soil beneath your feet to the community all around you. That's why the Noble Research Institute created their Essentials of Regenerative Grazing course to teach ranchers like you easy-to-follow techniques to quickly assess your forage production and infrastructure capacity in order to begin grazing more efficiently. Together, they can help you grow not only a healthier operation, but a legacy that lasts. Learn more on their website at noble.org/grazing. It's noble.org/grazing. On today's show, we have Marshall Whorley of Kateri Carbon. We talk about his journey, his education, and going into ranch management and what he's been doing up to the present point where he's leasing land and doing some custom grazing and what the future has for him. Then for the overgrazing section, we dive into Kateri Carbon and finding out what they're doing for farmers and how you can benefit from that. We discuss that. Of course, we wrap up with the famous four. For the bonus segment, we talk about border collies. So for Grazing Grass Insiders, that'll be available for you soon. 10 seconds about the farm. Fall calving season for my dad's cows has started, so we've got a few calves on the ground. It is dry here. We could use some rain. 10 seconds about the podcast. First, thank you for this delayed episode this week. Thank you for understanding. The episode that was due to come out Wednesday when I went to edit it on Tuesday, I didn't have half of the audio, which is a slight problem for a podcast. If it was a video, we could have made do, but audio, much tougher. Marshall was scheduled to come on, so we're able to get his episode recorded and out the door. I want to say thank you to the Grazing Grass community. I asked about suggestions for guests, and you all came through once again. Tremendous guests that you would like to hear from. So I'm reaching out to them, and you can be watching for those episodes in the future. Let's share a review before we talk to Marshall. So review says superb, empowering, enlightening. I love this podcast, unfailingly inspiring, and mind-opening for those of us committed to healing the soil, ourselves, and each other. Thank you, Isini Rising. I think I said that right. I tried to. I appreciate the review. Much too kind, but I do appreciate it. Excellent conversation with Marshall today. So let's talk to Marshall. Marshall, we want to welcome you to the Grazing Grass Podcast. We're excited you're here today.
Thank you, sir. I'm honored to be here. I'm a fan of the show and get a lot out of podcasts, so I'm happy to help wherever I can.
Well, thank you. Marshall, to get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your operation?
Sure. I am from Central Texas. I live in a little town called Gatesville. I grew up around this area. I got started in ranching from a very young age. My grandfather owned sale barns, was an auctioneer, ranched, traded cattle, all of those things. And when I was a little kid, I loved that. You could have asked me if you wanted to be a professional baseball player or a rancher. I would have said a rancher. I love those guys. So that's what I did growing up. And when I was in high school, my grandfather passed away. We sold the sale barn. A lot of things changed. But after I graduated high school, I wanted to continue my passion in agriculture. So I pursued a degree in animal science at Texas A&M. Upon completion of that, I went to go work at 44 Farms, where I had been interning while I was at A&M. I worked for them for about a year, and I was the in charge of nutrition, but more or less I drove the feed truck. And I quickly realized after that, that's not what I wanted the upside of my education to be. So I applied to TCU Ranch Management and was accepted into that program. And that was really a hard but very influential year of my life where I met a lot of people, found a lot of great mentors, really started my journey in grass management. I come from an area that is almost completely overgrazed everywhere you go, and that's just the norm. And when we talked about the big four native grass species, I didn't know what those guys were talking about. So it got me at that when I realized how little of it I knew and how much more I needed to educate myself, because as ranchers, first and foremost, we're grass farmers. We're not livestock owners, and caring for that natural resource is the utmost importance, and it allows us to be sustainable through the ebbs and flows in the weather changes in the market.
Well said there. A couple of things. I hate to even bring up A&M on the podcast. They left the Big 12, went to the SEC. I seem to enjoy it a bit much when they lose, being an OSU grad. But going through OSU and getting their animal science degree, it's been a few decades for me. We didn't talk about grass. Well, I took a rangeland management class, but really the grass farmer and managing our grasses and soil health like we do now was not mentioned. At Texas A&M, was that starting to creep in, or were they still in that traditional academic mindset of here's your input, here's what you get out of it?
Yes, sir. When I was there, it was very much the old school. I think now they've brought in Jeff Goodwin to help a lot with their range science department, and I think it's changing. So, and it's just changing for the better. But yes, my experience was very similar to yours.
Yeah, and OSU is doing some changes as well, and some of the programs they're doing now. Now, when you went to the TCU Ranch Management course, was it more the same, or had they adjusted some?
They're very much grass based. They
Oh,
are
yeah.
managing the ecosystems is first and foremost. And you have to understand that what they say at TCU is they want to be able to drop you out anywhere in the world and you be able to evaluate the natural resources and the financial resources of the landowner and be able to put together a plan that is going to be not only the best for the land, but also the best financially for the landowner.
Oh, yeah.
So it was just totally different and unique. And I can't say enough good things about TCU Ranch Management and what it's done.
Oh, very good. Very good. One thing I want to jump back just a little bit before we talk more about ranch management. You said your grandfather owned sale barns or a sale barn. I love going to sale barns. Even now, I go and it just immediately takes me back to my childhood. I enjoy it so much, and I'm actually disappointed I don't get to go more often.
Yes,
I'm sure you have some of those same things being around it with your grandpa having one.
absolutely. It was a great place to learn, and I still like to go as often as I can to keep an ear on the market. And you're always that's really, we can talk about grass all we can, but being able to adapt and change with the market is equally important, and then continue to be sustainable and profitable in this industry.
Oh, yeah. I completely agree. I've just started recently. My dad does this all the time, but he all the time calls me, "Hey, do you have so and so auction on?" Because he's watching it on his phone. So I've actually started watching more online as I'm doing other work, which is very distracting for me. But that's a great use of technology if it doesn't distract me too much. Anyway, I just want to go on that tangent for just a second about sale barn because it was probably my dad would say we didn't go all that much. I felt like we went every week, and it was one of my favorite times.
Yeah, no, definitely met a lot of great people and learned a lot. There's a lot of really knowledgeable cattle buyers in there, and you can certainly learn quite a bit of about buying and trading cattle in a sale barn.
Yeah. Okay. So got that tangent out of the way. Let's jump back to that TCU Ranch Management. And you talked about very grass-based, holistic view of the ranch and what you're doing. At the time, were you running any of your own cows, or were you focused just on school at that time?
I was focused just on school at that time. After A&M, I really thought that I wanted to pursue the seed stock operations because that's how we were taught, and we thought
Oh,
that
yeah.
was the highest level. And then after I love 44, no knock on those guys, but after seeing that, I realized that the commercial side is what really drew me and interested me more. Grass management was really where I wanted to be. I grew up also, we had a lot of sheep and goats, and
Yes.
I think that's always interested me just because of the profitability of the sheep and goat versus the cattle. And I've always known from a young age that if you can't make money doing this, it's not going to last long. So I'm not somebody that has endless pockets. So I had to figure out a different industry that I could be successful in.
So once you finished that ranch management, what was your next step in your journey?
I took a job managing a ranch, probably in western central Texas. That was around the area of Rady. He had a very kind of basic rotation at that point. I say I was a manager. I managed that specific portion, that
Oh,
part of the
yeah.
ranch, but there was multiple ranches under that whole umbrella, and there was a head manager. And it was a great experience, but I realized that we needed to be doing more with our grass management. A basic 3 herd, 4 pasture rotation, that's just not going to get it done,
Oh, yeah.
especially in an area where it forgets to rain too much. And
Mm.
with the increasing cost of everything, we have to figure out a way to be able to grow more forage and really truly utilize the entire ranch. And then with that, increasing our water availability, all those things that congregate with that.
When did you start looking for leased land so you could run some of your own animals?
It's something that I've always wanted to do, but as a just getting out of school, I did not have the funds to look at doing that. I really didn't have the time to look at doing that. And I will say that, oh, I've been managing ranches for 8 years out of school. And as a ranch manager, I learned a ton because really when after graduating from TCU, you think you know a lot until you get out there and you start doing it and you realize, hey, you don't know nearly as much as you think you do, and you need to continue your education.
Oh,
And I think
yes.
that was a blessing, right? If I would have started right out of the box, I think I would have stumped my toe a lot, and I still stump my toe today a lot, but probably less than what I would have out of the box. But as a ranch manager, you do not have time
Oh, yeah.
to try to do things on the side. You need to spend all your time focused on that landowner's cattle and maintaining that landowner's property because that's what you're paid to do, and you need to do that to the best of your ability. Really, my time of leasing land is really very short. Like I said, I've been doing this for 8 years, but just here recently, within the last 6 months, I was able to pick up some close friends' properties who decided to get out of the business, and I was able to take that over. So I'm very not new in the cattle industry, but very new when it
Right.
comes to leasing my own properties. Yes, sir.
So just on that leasing land and leasing property, it sounds like it's a prior relationship that because of that relationship and the other person deciding to sell out gave you an opportunity there. Was
Yes, sir.
leasing land always a thought that's a pathway in, or was it something that this came up and you're like, oh, I could do that?
No, I learned from it when I was a little kid. My grandfather always told me the way that you remain profitable in this industry is by securing basically good deals.
Oh, yeah.
Good leases is that's the way that you can start out of being successful in ranching. And then with those retained earnings, then you can look to buy your own property. Um, my family has a place. It's not huge. So I always knew that I was going to have something else to make an economic unit out of everything. And so leasing land was always very important to me. They emphasize that at TCU. They emphasize that in ranching for profit. And that it's very true. A lot of times when you're leasing land, you're able to lease that land for less than what you would have an interest payment on buying land. So
Oh,
you will
yeah.
cripple yourself financially trying to buy land.
Yeah. And so often people go in and buy land, and that sets them back financially from what they want to get because they were so eager in buying land. Of course, I'm sure it's this way in your area, but finding land to lease is always, I hate to say difficult, maybe difficult's the right word. It is difficult. The land's in use already by somebody, or if it's not being used for grazing, that person usually has other purposes and they don't always think grazing's a good idea.
Yes, sir. It's very similar in my area. Urbanization is a, however you want to think of it. I think of it as a problem. I guess it does increase our land values, but we have people moving in to this area of Texas that they just want a small little, whatever you want to say, homestead,
Yeah.
little
Oh,
ranch
yeah.
to play on, and that makes it difficult to get in and lease land. And I will say that my success has just been prior relationships and not being forceful with people, but just always be there to answer any questions they have and let them build that rapport with them and have them start to trust you. And little by little, they'll sway over to leasing you their property. A lot of times when you really get to build that relationship, you learn that they're not profitable. And most people, they love to ranch, but they also hate to lose money. So if you can figure out
Yeah.
a way to say, hey, I'm going to bring you X amount of thousands of dollars more than you were making prior, they'll listen to you. And especially if you can compound that with better management practices than what were previously happening.
Oh, yeah. Now, one thing just to clarify in my mind where you're located, you said Central Texas, West Central Texas, maybe. I saw a deal the other day that said that triangle area of Texas from Dallas to Houston to Austin or San Antonio, that triangle area is one of the fastest growing areas in the U.S., if not the fastest. I don't remember the exact numbers, but you're west of that just a little bit, if I'm correct.
More or less, yes, or a little bit west of it.
Yeah. Not too far from it, though.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not a lot of large ranches left in the area that I live in. Our average less than 500 acres, really. A 2,000 acre ranch is far and few between where I live.
Oh, yeah. So I grew up, I say I grew up, I actually live right here where I spent my teenage years working on the dairy. But before I was a teenager, we lived south of Chelsea at Bushy Head. And when we lived out there as a kid, we were just about 2 miles off the highway on a paved road. And we used to tell people, or Dad used to tell people, we were the third house. 2 miles in, we were the third house. You go down there now, and we moved out of there in 85. We moved here in 85. You go there now, it's houses up on houses. It's just 5 acres, 10 acres maybe. It's just every once in a while you'll come across a 40 or something. But it's just crazy how that area has changed. For where we live now, it's definitely larger pieces here, but you can feel the encroachment. And obviously, as generations pass on and it's passed down, it gets chopped up. Like there was an auction the other day, and it wasn't too many acres, and they're chopping it up into 3 pieces. I'm like, don't chop it up. But they didn't ask me, so.
Right. That's the world we live in today. So we have to learn to adapt.
Right, exactly. So it means we got to do a few other things. Now, you said you finished your TCU ranching management and you've managed ranches for a number of years and you got some lease property not too long ago. First, before we talk more about your lease property and how you're going to manage that, what did you really take away from those ranch management jobs?
That ranching, no matter how good of a manager you are, is very difficult. Every year is a new pitch, and it's the weather, it's health,
Yeah.
it's market. And really what I took away more than anything was the places that rely solely on income from basically one type of livestock. It's going to be very hard to be successful year in and year out. It's going to be very hard to be successful. So any way that you can open up and have new revenue sources come in, whether that be through adding a new species that you're grazing, by hunting leases, promoting that, by carbon contracts, whatever you can do to be able to have new revenue sources come into the ranch is going to be paramount to your sustainability and to be able to keep that property in the family for a long time. Especially when you're forced with land prices, just in my lifetime, that have times 5, times 10 in some places.
Oh, yeah. I believe the land we're setting on, Dad purchased it in mid 80s or mid to late 80s. And I would say if he were to price it right now, it would be at least 10 to 12x what he paid for it.
Yes, sir.
And I think that's the general feel around here. It has really shot up.
Yes, sir.
Now, when you were able to get this lease, you've got all this experience. So what was your plan for this lease land?
My plan was to be profitable year one.
That should be a goal for more people.
Yes, sir. I knew with the cattle market the way that it is right now, there weren't a lot of good buys out there. So I took the advice of many good books written before me and many people that I've listened to on podcasts before, and we brought in some custom care cattle, and that just allowed us to be profitable year one and start slowly improving the property, but with profit of paramount importance. Once we get there, once the market shows opportunities, I'll be happy to start investing in it. But right now, it's too rich for my blood.
Oh, yes. Yeah. There's not anything I can add to that. It's just the prices I see. I'm like, oh, maybe I should sell more.
And I think that's what the TCU Ranch Management, ranching for profit, having this background in ranch management has allowed me to make relationships and connections where people are willing to send the cattle and trust that you're going to do a good job and take care of their stock for them.
And so that brings up the question, how did you find cattle to custom graze?
Prior relationships,
Yes.
people that I've worked for in a previous ranch that I've managed and I've met. And
Oh,
those
yeah.
are guys run a lot of stocker cattle and they're always looking to expand. And I just happened to the right place at the right time.
Did you reach out to them or happen to be
Yes,
having
sir.
a conversation, bring it up, and it worked out good for you?
Yes, sir. I reached out to them.
Getting this lease land, did you go in and do anything to get it set up to manage your grass better? Or was it pretty much the way you wanted to go?
The initial place that we've got the cattle on right now is really set up nicely. And it's cross fence. I think it has 16 different pastures. And
Oh,
we're going
wow.
to continue to subdivide, but it was already set up really nice. And that's why I knew that we could make a big change pretty quick. It's just getting the stock of cattle healthy and then being able to graze the way that we want to graze. But health is always this first when you start getting those little rascals in.
Oh, yes. So are you moving those on a calendar-based system, or how are you deciding how to move them and rotate them?
Really just observe and adapt to what we're seeing out there. When we took that place on, it was overgrown.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we're trying to get it grazed down a little bit and get the grass a little more palatable where the cattle can gain efficiently on it.
So you mentioned there, you brought in some cattle to custom graze because you are making sure you can be profitable in the short term so you get to that long-term part.
Yes,
You'd
sir.
also mentioned earlier that multiple species are multiple income streams. That would be a better way to say it because it's not always a different species. It may be carbon, it may be honey, energy, different streams. You've got one stream right now. Are you thinking about what you could do to provide a second stream of income from that land?
Absolutely. To me, cattle are the easiest to deal with out of the box.
Oh,
Mama
yeah.
cows easiest, stockers second. But when you start getting into sheep and goats, you really need to understand the property, understand the fences, because they offer a whole nother host of issues that you have to deal with. And you really need to be prepared before you pull that trigger. I've seen bad scenarios in that where the property's not ready to bring those species in and it doesn't work. So we're going to use the profit that we're making up front to be able to invest in getting the places set up to be able to handle the different species. Yes, sir. And I think in my area, really sheep and goats are paramount to keeping the savannas open. If we completely take away the browsers, the brush encroachment will kill you and you can't afford to be out there running a skid steer or spraying herbicide. And that's not something I want to be doing anyways. I would rather use livestock to be able to help me with that brush encroachment issue.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. And you bring up excellent points there. One, of livestock to get ready for, cattle's probably the easiest, especially if you're leasing a place that's already had cattle on it. Makes it real easy. If you're dealing with sheep and goats, that fencing, especially for goats, is much more difficult, and you got to figure that out. Now, I'm going to give a plug to, if you're in my area, Southeast Kansas, next week, I believe it's next week, Yes, it is. Regenerative Wisdom with Dale Strickler, Greg Christensen,
Christensen.
having sheep and goat grazing school. They have a grazing school for a couple of days, then sheep and goats a couple of days. And herd quitter and working cows, Greg was just on both of those talking about his operation, what he's doing. It's very interesting. So if you're in my area and you're thinking maybe sheep and goats, I think that'd be an excellent school. I have not committed to it yet, but I'm definitely thinking I may need to go. Wait, let me reword that. I know I need to go. I may go ahead and cough up the money to go.
Yeah, Greg
So,
Christensen, he has a lot of good stuff.
oh, he does. Yeah.
I've read his books and listened to a lot of his stuff.
Yeah. He really does. And the way he's utilizing land for goats and sheep, yeah, I think it'll be a really good conference. And enough of a plug for them that I need to contact Dell and say, where's my affiliate?
Where's your discount?
Yeah, my discount. Exactly. You're right. Yeah, that's why I called Dale and say, hey, I need a discount because I just plugged you all. Anyway, you'd mentioned goats or sheep. Do you have a preference on which way you go in the future?
It depends on the property. Sheep and goats are
perfect
they're different.
answer.
They're different grazers, and a place that has more of an issue with browse, goats would be the answer. A place that really has more weeds, sheep are the answer. But yeah, everything in ranching is observe and adapt to what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, and over time, that ratio of sheep to cattle or sheep to goats to cattle can change. So yeah, it's so
Yes,
much
sir.
of it's about observation. So, Marshall, that's really exciting for you to have your own lease and to start managing that and see how that goes for you. But for our overgrazing section, which is sponsored by Redmond now, so we really appreciate Redmond coming on as a sponsor. At Redmond, we know that you thrive when your animals do. That's why it's essential to fill the gaps in your herd's nutrition with the minerals that they need. Made by nature, our ancient mineral salt and conditioner clay are the catalyst in optimizing the nutrients your animals get from their forage. Unaltered and unrefined, our minerals have the natural balance and proportion that your animals prefer. This gives your herd the ability to naturally regulate their mineral consumption as they graze. Our minerals won't just help you improve the health of your animals, but will also help you naturally build soil fertility so you can grow more nutrient-dense pasture year after year. Nourish your animals, your soil, and your life with Redmond. Learn more at redmondagriculture.com. For our overgrazing section today, we're going to talk about Kateri carbon. So first off, just tell us who Kateri is.
Yes, sir. Well, Kateri is a fairly new company in the carbon market. We were formed almost out of the company Vince. Our CEO, Ben Vares, he worked to build Vince into what it is today. And when Vince acquired Merck acquired Vince, Ben saw an opportunity to basically step out and carve out a carbon aspect of the clientele that he basically got in contact with Vince. They've been around for a year and a half, 2 years. We really started in the Northwest, and they have progressively moved south and east. And they're very intelligent guys, really know a lot about the carbon market. And how I got brought into the picture was they wanted someone who understood Texas and Oklahoma and had contacts in Texas and Oklahoma so we could start to continue to make this push east and get into higher rainfall areas. Yes, sir.
So with this into the carbon area, explain what we mean by carbon and what they're doing.
Yes, sir. So basically, when we're talking about carbon, we're talking about your soil organic carbon, that carbon stored in the soil. And it is traded on a basis of a ton of carbon equals that's a carbon credit. A lot of our Fortune 500 companies, they want to claim that they're being carbon neutral. And so the way that they do that is they have to purchase carbon offsets. And one way that you can purchase a carbon offset is by purchasing 1 ton of carbon in grasslands, or one form of how we can store carbon out of the atmosphere.
question before we dive a little bit deeper into that. One question you mentioned started in the Northwest US, you expanding eastward. Is it a United States focused company at this point?
Yes, sir. As of now, we're just focused in the United States. We're in, I believe it is 13 different states in the United States, and we're making an eastward push. We have ranches in Texas, we have ranches in
Oh,
Oklahoma,
yeah.
Kansas, but we're working to move east because that, quite frankly, it rains a lot more towards the east, and that is typically a higher yielding area.
Yeah.
But we in the future would love to move into Canada and Mexico, but right now we're focusing on North America.
Oh, yes. So you mentioned there about the carbon credit. Companies can purchase that to offset their carbon losses that they're manufacturing or whatever they're doing are causing. So just to a person out here, a farmer, how can this help them?
As I mentioned earlier, it is another revenue source. And to me, that is imperative to being profitable year in and year out. And a lot of people, we're already wanting to implement these practices. So the really neat thing about Kateri is we're backed by some very large corporations that have already pre-purchased our carbon credits. And so
Oh,
what
yeah.
that does is that allows us to invest in the rancher and infrastructure on your property. It just depends on what every ranch is different, right? So every situation is unique. But if you have large open pastures, we can supply you with vents, virtual fencing, Gallagher virtual fencing. If you need to enhance your water infrastructure, we can enhance your water infrastructure for you. If you wanted to continue to use polywire, we can help further fund that. One thing that we also do is we provide you one-on-one with a ranch advisor. And I'm talking about people that are really knowledgeable in the regenerative space. So I'm talking Jim Garish, Alejandro Carrillo, Kirk Gadzia, Enrique Guerrero, people that are out there writing books and are at the pinnacle of knowledge of amplified grazing, of regenerative grazing. And so I feel like that nobody else is doing that in the industry. And when you start this journey like I did, you're going to make mistakes. And to be able to have someone who has had 30 plus years of experience doing it, that's going to be whether you're going to be successful or not. And so with us putting forward the main concern or the main kickback I get when I start talking about amplified grazing is, well, we're not set up for that. We don't have the infrastructure for that. So if you could find a partner like Kateri to partner with that is willing to put in that upfront cost or to give you virtual fencing, infrastructure costs, set you up with a one-on-one advisor that's really knowledgeable in this, pay for all the soil sampling, pay for all the validation and verification. To me, that is a no-brainer deal.
Oh, yeah.
Honestly.
Now you mentioned there someone who's not doing this, Kateri can help with those costs and get going with that. For someone who's already doing it, is it still beneficial for them?
The way that these carbon credits are recognized is through additionality. So something that you've been doing 15 years in the past, we cannot credit you for what you were doing in the past. We only can credit you for what you're doing in the future. So really, it would benefit more someone who's going from a conventional set stock mentality that has changed their mind and has opened up to say, hey, I really want to do something else. I want to implement this. They're really our ideal candidate for this. Not to say that we can't help people that are already doing it. We can't, like I said, we can't pay you for past practices. So our ideal candidate is someone who is in a transition, and we help them transition and be successful with that transition.
Yeah. So someone who's doing set stocking, managed traditionally, them changing to grazing is going to have a dramatic effect on their end result and really make a difference.
And I can say that I've been on a lot of places throughout the Southern Plains. There's not a lot of places that don't have additionality. Most all places could be doing better, and it's a lot of times it's not their fault. It's they don't have the resources and the funding to really make those changes.
So let's say you talk to an individual and they're like, yeah, let's get started. Talk about that process just a little bit to get started and what happens that first year.
Sure. So initially, what we would find someone that we see eye to eye with, they're wanting to utilize amplified grazing, regenerative grazing. We want to truly have a in-depth understanding of your operation, of your goals. What is your footprint? Are you seed stock? Are you stocker? Are you cow calf? What are your goals? And once we have that initial, make that initial relationship and have that rapport, if we feel that this is going to be beneficial for both parties, because we're not going to sign anyone up, that they have to match what we're wanting to do because both parties have to be profitable.
Oh,
After
yes.
that happens, you would send us in some KML maps. I would send it off to our mapping team, and they would put it through an analysis where they would analyze your grass cover, your soil organic carbon, the potential improvement of soil organic carbon, how much rain falls in your area, soil type. This is it's a long process, right? But with that, we are able to more accurately make the decision: is this property worth us pursuing?
Oh, yeah.
And if it is worth us pursuing, we would send one of our team members out there to your property to meet you one on one, put boots on the ground. Because what I was saying prior, that's all through satellites. You need to have somebody out there on the ground actually shoring this up and making sure what you're seeing through the satellite is actually what's out there. So I would come out, meet with you, really get an in-depth understanding of your property, in-depth understanding of your operation. We would send out a ranch advisor for you to meet with and start working on a plan. And we would take baseline soil samples, because what we find through that satellite data, that's just an estimate. What we really need to do is take that baseline soil sample, and we take soil samples a meter deep to really quantify what's going on out there and get a baseline for what the starting point is.
One thing with that, you're taking these samples, you're getting this baseline, you're meeting with a ranching advisor. I'm not sure what terminology you use there, but they're there to support the landowner. Obviously, you've talked to the landowner. You guys, they're seeing eye to eye with their mission as well as your mission, so you're both on the same path. But does that mean that farmer is giving does he have to follow the suggestions given to him, or does he still have some management autonomy there in what he's doing?
What we say at Kateri is observe, collaborate, and adapt. The ranch advisor is not going to be out there all the time. He might be meeting with you 1 to 3 times a year. So it is, the rancher can make his own decisions. Yeah. We're just helping you in that process. This is not whatsoever a cookie cutter plan. And I can tell you, no cookie cutter plans work. Everything is always changing. And we're just simply a partner to help you be successful. We're in this just as much as you are. It is a 70-30 profit split. 70% goes to the ranch. 70% of the carbon credit sales go to the rancher. 30% go to Kateri. So if you are wildly successful, we are successful. If you fail, we fail. And I'll say another thing. One thing that's unique about Kateri: if you fail, we take all the downside risk. You are not going to have to pay back money if you don't store carbon. And we're able to do that because we already have the funding from large corporations to help you make this change. So it is simply, there's very little risk for the rancher in this scenario. And that's what drew me to this company, because I know as an industry, we have to change. We have to start thinking about our environment. We have a lot of people out there saying bad things about us. So if we can use large corporate money to help us make changes, that's better for both of us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The corporations are getting what they want in a carbon offset, and we're able to enhance our management.
Right. Yeah. Well, just that ranching advisor coming down, I'd be a little embarrassed Jim Garish come down to my farm, because I know he'd have quite the list of what I need to do differently. But just think of the potential value from that. If you just lean heavily on that and be like, they're the expert, let's do what they're suggesting. And if it doesn't work, then we'll discuss it. But let's lean heavily on that. That could make a big difference.
Absolutely. And I would say that with my experience in ranching, if you're not willing to listen to others' advice, you're not going to be successful, right? Sometimes advice might not work, but if you ask 3 people, a lot of times they've made the mistake that you're getting ready to make. So this is the same thing. It's just we're using people that are really influential in the industry and have a lot of knowledge to help you with those decisions.
Yeah, I think that's really beneficial. And just go off different opinions. A beekeeper saying is, you ask 10 beekeepers how to do something, you get 12 different ways. So there's multitude of ways out there, and just having that expert guru there is really beneficial. Now, when we talk about this, is this something that just happens over a couple years? Is it decades? What's the time frame?
Our contract is for 30 years. It is in two phases, a 10-year practice change, and then from year 10 to year 30 is a conservation phase. We would hope after you start implementing these adaptive grazing principles, you'll see that this is beneficial not only to add an additional revenue source, but it's beneficial to increase stocking rate, health of the cattle, umpteen different better things,
Tons of benefits there.
benefits.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So you would continue on with this practice. So theoretically, you can be paid for 30 years on carbon credits. But at year 10, if you decided, hey, we're going to make this property into a hunting ranch, you don't have to commit to adaptive grazing for 30 years. At year 10, you could stop, change that property over, and go back to doing what you were doing prior, as long as you don't materially disturb the soil. So no plowing, and hopefully you're not going to build a neighborhood on it. But as long as that soil is not materially disturbed, you're not going to owe any money back.
Now, when you talk about a practice phase and a conservation phase, what's the difference between the two phases?
The practice phase is where you're actually implementing a practice in your management. You're actually implementing the practice change in your management. So you're switching, you're creating a delta, you're creating a change in the management. So you would go from set stock to amp grazing. The conservation phase, what I'm meaning by that is you don't have to graze cattle anymore. The soil carbon that we stored in year 1 through 10, that is in the soil, and we're just wanting to conserve it at that point. You can continue you can continue the practice changes for all 30 years and receive carbon payments for 30 years. But what we're trying to do is not make it such a burden on the landowner to say, I have to do this for 30 years. It's really a 10-year commitment of rotating your stock a certain way.
Oh, okay. So let me paraphrase this and just make sure I have this correct, Marshall. So it's a 10-year period, but you are committing to 30 years of not disturbing your soil, basically.
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. And I think that's a great model or change, because I know I've had conversations with my dad about carbon and selling carbon credits, but the period of time, he's like, we can't even really discuss it because it's too long for him. He's like, I'm not saying what you all have to do to the land in 30 or 40 years.
That's totally understandable. This is not for everyone. If you're someone who's thinking about selling in the future, this is probably not for you. Really, what we're trying to be able to keep large ranches in the family. People that don't have any desire to sell, they want to improve their management, and they want to be able to bring in another revenue source. That's really who we are.
Oh, yeah.
Partner with.
So to me, and not to exclude anyone, but younger ranchers or farmers who's getting started, or maybe another generation's coming on, so it's the plan for the foreseeable future, this really works in really good for them.
Absolutely. People that are wanting to make a change. This really, to me, is something that is something you should at least do your due diligence and research, because it's something that can help you make that change and fund that change.
Now, I know in other research, other conversations about carbon credits, planting of trees was one thing that was encouraged or required for some. Do you want the landowner to plant some trees, or just focus on the grass there?
We're primarily focused on grazing lands. Enhancing your grazing management is where we feel we can make the biggest improvement. And I'll say that we also go further in, if you have some dry land, farmland, or irrigated farmland that you've decided this is too expensive to continue on, we can fund the conversion of that previously tilled land back to native grass. And that is a huge benefit for people, because it's very expensive when you go back to planting native grass.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, Marshall, I'm trying to think of an intelligent question here. Most of the time, my best questions happen at 2 a.m. So I wake up and be like, oh, that's what I should have asked. But I think this is really interesting. And as I think about your model and what you've said, I immediately think of a lot of people that could benefit from it. But one
Yeah.
one thing, my initial thoughts are when I look around at land ownership in my area, it's all well, so my dad's got land, so he's a generation older than me, and I'm 50 something. And my grandpa, we're going to celebrate his birthday on Sunday, and he's only turning 98, and he still's got a large tract of land up here. Some of those things will be changing in the not hopefully not in the near future, but they will be changing in the future. But as this gets going, that may be a possibility for whoever that next generation is, or if the land is sold or something. Yeah. Is there a minimum acreage size you all want to look at before you even have the discussion?
Yes, sir. Our largest expense is the soil testing.
Oh, yeah.
And we're working to try to decrease those costs. And I think as the technology improves, we will be able to decrease some of that soil testing cost. But right now, I would say we're looking at ranches 2 to 3,000 acres is probably our minimum. And a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
of it does depend on rainfall. As we move east, deep East Texas, where it rains 50 inches a year, that size can decrease because the yield of carbon would be drastically higher than what it would
Oh,
be in
yeah.
eastern New Mexico. Yes, sir. One thing that I want to bring up is one thing that we do that kind of sets ourselves apart from other people in this industry is we require the cattle to be GPS tracked. And the reason we
Oh,
do
okay.
that is we want to hold our standards up to the absolute highest level. Carbon markets are under a lot of scrutiny. And when that tide goes out, we don't want to be caught with our pants down. So we want to hold our credit to the highest, absolute highest standard. That way, those buyers can look at our credit and say, we have proof, we have data behind what's actually happening. We can prove these changes are actually happening. And not only is that beneficial from a buyer's aspect, for the rancher, we can sit there and prove, hey, this methodology we were using grazing worked or it didn't work because we have the data to back that. We can
Oh,
prove
yeah.
these cattle were in this pasture for this long. And that opens up, that's endless opportunity really for being able to enhance your management on your ranch.
Yeah, just the amount of data you're getting from that. And I assume you guys are doing that with events callers so that you're able to do that, or are you doing another way?
Vents is one of our options. So
Oh,
for
okay.
virtual fencing, we work with Gallagher, we work with vets, and we kind of custom tailor this program to what the rancher wants. If
Oh,
you are
okay.
in Western Oklahoma with 10,000 acre pastures and it's really rough, Vents or Gallagher might work for you. If you are in East Texas with 100 acre pastures, that's not necessary. So we
Oh, yeah.
also work with other GPS tags and we work with movement. That's a GPS tag. That's just simply a tag that looks just like a basic cattle tag that goes in the ear. 701X. We're looking at working with Herd X. So we can custom tailor this program
Oh, okay.
to what the rancher is wanting. If all you're wanting is you're after technology, you don't really care about the carbon payments, we can fund you with as much technology as you want. We can give you the Gallagher eShepherd virtual fencing. We can provide you with enriched ag cameras. We can provide you with flux towers, everything that you want. And then on the other hand, if you're someone that is only interested in the carbon payment, we can make a cheaper program to where maybe you don't need a ranch advisory. We can use the basic movement tag. So basically, this whole system is to benefit you, and we can custom tailor it to what your wants, needs, and goals are.
Oh, yeah. Now, one thing I probably should have asked a little bit earlier, you talked about in that first year, you're going out and doing some soil samples. You're getting some baseline. Are you coming back yearly to do soil samples?
We come back every 3 to 5 years to take
Oh,
soil
okay.
samples. And that's what quantifies this change that's actually
Right.
occurring. Yes, sir. We also pair that with those enriched ag cameras, and the enriched ag cameras are really neat. They are constant. You can put them on your four wheeler, your buggy. They're constantly taking photos of the rangeland, so they estimate the forage curve. They can tell how much diversity you have in your pastures. They can help you set your stocking rates, and that also allows us to see, is there a change going on that we can also pair with those soil samples.
Now, most of the the vendors and products you mentioned, I'm familiar with, at least passingly. But this enriched ag vision or ag
Yes, sir.
cameras,
Enriched
I'm
ag, I
not
think it is a vision camera.
I'm not familiar with it at all. I just
It's
pulled it
very,
up here to
very
look.
neat technology.
It's the way technology is advancing. It's going to be amazing what they can do if we can survive it. Yeah, very interesting. I'm gonna have to do a little deeper dive on that because that does look really interesting.
That's one positive thing about Kateri. We pay for all of this technology. But one thing I'll say about the enriched ag camera is coming from a ranching background, a lot of this stuff is art, right? Looking at grasses and estimating forage
Oh yeah.
and your quality of forage, all of these things. It would be amazing to have technology that could also give you another set of eyes that is not skewed to whatever's going on in that current year. You know how it is when we're in a drought. Things might to you look a little bit better, but if you can go back and say this is what it actually looked like in 2021, that's
Oh
a
yeah.
huge benefit for the rancher.
Yeah. Well, just relating that to my marriage, I hide all the old pictures of me so my wife doesn't look at those pictures and think, "Oh, this is what it looked like and now this?" So, yeah, I think pictures are very important, but having that another set of eyes, even if it's AI, and I'm going to say this, and I don't know that this product is, but if there's some AI in it that helps figure out that stuff, it's just another tool. And that's one thing we have to remember. These are all tools for us to use the data to make good decisions. They don't just provide you all the answers.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Marshall, before we move on to the famous 4 questions, is there anything else you would like to add about Kateri?
I feel Kateri, compared to the competition, we are holding ourselves at the highest standards, but we also truly value our connection with the rancher. We want you to feel that you can reach out to us anytime, and we are really there fighting in your corner. If you need me to come out and evaluate something on your property, I'm just a phone call away. And so we just want to work really close hand in hand with the landowner, have a great relationship, and we really both want to be successful.
Oh, very good. I do think it sounds very interesting. And it's definitely something I would check into for our own farm here if situation was different. I know my dad's not interested in it at this point, but maybe sometime in the future it may be something we're interested in because I completely agree about multiple income streams and how are you planning for profitability.
Yes, sir.
Well, Marshall, it is time for us to transition to our famous 4 questions, sponsored by Ken Cove Farm Fence. Ken Cove Farm Fence is a proud supporter of the Grazing Grass podcast and grazers everywhere. At Ken Cove Farm Fence, they believe there is true value within the community of grazers and land stewards. The results that follow proper management and monitoring can change the very world around us. That's why Ken Cove is dedicated to providing an ever-expanding line of grazing products to make your chores easier and your land more abundant. Whether you're growing your own food on the homestead or grazing on thousands of acres, Ken Cove has everything you need to do it well. From reels to tumblewheels, polytwine to electric nets, water valves to water troughs, you'll find what you're looking for at Ken Cove. They carry brands like Speedrite, O'Brien's, Kiwi Tech, Strainrite, Job, and more. Ken Cove is proud to be part of your regenerative journey. Call them today or visit kencove.com and be sure to follow them on social media and subscribe to the Ken Cove YouTube channel at Ken Cove Farm Fence for helpful how-to videos and new product releases. They're the same 4 questions we ask of all of our guests. And Marshall, I hope you've studied, so we'll find out. The first question, Marshall, what is your favorite grazing grass related book or resource?
Multiple answers to that. I've read Dirt to Soil, Holistic Management. I've read Greg Judy's books, but the one I continually pull back out is Thoughts and Advice from an Old Cattleman. And, that has some grazing management in it, but I think it shows you a lot of history of what's happened in the cattle industry. And it's definitely my favorite.
Is that Gordon Hazard's book?
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yes,
was
sir.
turned around here. I thought I have it on my bookshelf right here, but I'm not seeing it.
He talks about regenerative practices before regenerative was a thing.
Oh, yeah.
He was ahead of his time. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed his book. Excellent selections there. Our second question, what is your favorite tool to use on the farm?
Mine is probably unique to any other answers, but those would be my herding dogs, my border collies. I could not get by without them. They allow me to work a lot by myself. And it's hard to find good help sometimes. And when I get frustrated, they're there to cool me down. And yeah, they are my favorite tool.
I am so glad you brought that up, Marshall. Let's go ahead and move to our third question. What would you tell someone just getting started?
Don't be afraid to make mistakes, and you're not going to ask a stupid question. I feel like there's too many people in this industry that are looking over their shoulder at what their neighbors are doing. And a lot of times that might not mean that he's successful just because he's doing something, because he's just trying to match the status quo. So be willing to go out there, make mistakes, ask a lot of questions, and be willing to educate yourself through conferences, Ranching for Profit, whatever that may be. TCU Ranch Management is a year-long commitment, and that might not be for everyone, but everyone can go to ranching, take a week off and go to Ranching for Profit. And that opens your mind. It allows you to meet so many smart people, and you have access to tons and tons of knowledge. So that's what I would tell someone starting out.
And I agree, Marshall. One thing I want to throw in there, sometimes when someone's getting started and they look at that cost and they look at being gone that long, it's difficult. There are some online resources that's not quite up to that level yet, but that's definitely a starting place as well. Do some online courses
Right.
till you're able to go.
And I would say with the Ranching for Profit, making a move and marketing cattle or screwing something up is a lot more costly than going to that school.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think you're right there. Yeah. Very good, Marshall. And lastly, where can others find out more about you?
If you are interested in Kateri, we have a website, and that is www.katericarbon.com. And Kateri is spelled Kateri. On that website, we have a lot of the stuff that we talked about today. We have umpteen different blogs, a lot of good resources about regenerative management. I'm also on Facebook. If anybody ever wants to ask me a question, you can find me at Marshall Whorley on Facebook.
Very good, Marshall. Really appreciate you coming on today and sharing.
Yes, sir. Hope everybody enjoys this and do their due diligence to at least look at what a carbon contract can bring them and how it can enhance their management on their property.
Very good. I really hope you enjoyed today's conversation. I know I did. Thank you for listening. And if you found something useful, please share it. Share it on your social media. Tell your friends. Get the word out about the podcast. Helps us grow. If you happen to be a grass farmer and you'd like to share about your journey, go to grazinggrass.com and click on Be Our Guest. Fill out the form and I'll be in touch. We appreciate your support by sharing our episodes and telling your friends about it. You can also support our show by buying our merch. We get a little bit back from that. Another way to support the show is by becoming a Grazing Grass Insider. Grazing Grass Insiders enjoy bonus content, monthly Zooms, and discounts. You can visit the website, grazinggrass.com, click on support, and they'll have the links there. Also, if you haven't left us a review, please do. It really helps us as people are searching for podcasts. And I was just checking them, and we do not have very many reviews for 2024. So if you haven't left us a review, please do. And until next time, keep on grazing grass.